What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to bring you a more casual review of the Canon RF. This is the 50mm 1.2L lens. I did a previous review on this, but it was a more technical review. I've had a lot more chance to use this, so I kind of just want to get a little discussion going on who this may be for, who it may not be for, why I think it's one of the best 50mm lenses, maybe one of the best lenses ever out there. I'll kind of go through a little bit about that and just some other general thoughts of it. So I've had it around 6 months now. I bought it from the Canon outlet for about $2,000, so it costs about $2,100 with taxes, so it is an expensive lens, so that's something to keep in mind. And I actually almost sold it just because of how expensive it is, and you could probably get the 50mm 1.8, the STM version, non-L series, which is $200, and probably get close to similar results, but I'll kind of go through why I think this is actually worth it if you have the money for it. It's an expensive lens. So I recently just got back from a trip from the ocean, and we took a ton of videos and photos there. This isn't the best lens for video just because the USM motors hunt a lot, especially if you're at 1.2 like you always hear it hunting. You almost need a lav mic, something that's away from the camera, otherwise you will hear those motors running all the time. Canon's STM motors, which are on their more budget-oriented lenses, are more focused on video, so they're more servo-based motors, so they're not as loud. They're more fluid, as these are very, very loud, especially when it comes to video. So a few things to discuss about this. It's mainly a plastic build, but it feels very, very well built. It is weather sealed. You do have a nice rubber gasket here on there, so basically once it's on your camera, you're basically sealed up and good to go. It is a little bit heavy of a lens, so I'm not sure of the exact weight of it, but it's significantly heavier compared to the EF 51.2, which I actually owned. When I talk about image quality, I'll kind of go through that on why I think this is one of the better lenses out there. So it is a little heavy. I have the Canon R6, and it bounces pretty well on it. It is a tad bit top heavy, but it's not too much to where you just struggle using it. So it is mainly plastic, but everything feels nice. The control ring has a nice click to it. Let's see if I can. So it has a real. So it does have a nice little click to it. The actual focus ring is really nice. I never used manual focus, especially on these mirrorless cameras, so I never used that, but it is nice and fluid. It's a little quick. There's not as much pull to it as I may like. Maybe a little bit more resistance would be nice, but real nice. The buttons are nice for the autofocus, manual focus, and the have a 77mm filter thread, which is nice. I like that. So just overall handling of it is really good. It is a tad bit heavy, which I've already said, but I want to say it multiple times because I didn't realize how heavy it was, so I used it often. So if you're not wanting a heavy lens, this is not what I would get. I would get the 51.8 STM and save about $1,800. So when it comes to actual image quality, that's where I think this thing shines. It's probably the best 50mm lens ever produced. I've had the EF 1.8 of Canons. I've had the Nikon 58mm 1.4, which is not 50mm, but it's more on the line of that. I've had Nikon's 51.4, they're 1.8. I've never had any of the Canons, the 1.8 lenses, but I did have the EF 1.2 for a couple years. And while I love that lens, it did have a little bit of flaws to it. So the big flaw was it wasn't centered. They had a lot of issues with control, quality control, where it just wasn't always in focus. So at that 1.2, it would be a little off, so it wasn't quite as in focus. It wasn't very sharp. It did have a lot of character to it, so I did really like it for that, but it wasn't the most sharpest lens out there. And then the Nikon 58mm 1.4 had similar issues. Very nice character to it, but it wasn't the most technical quality lens out there. So this lens is sharp all the time. 1.2, it nails focus 100% of the time. That's more of the Canon R6. in R5, the autofocus system they have in there, but it is always sharp, always in focus. You do not need to sharpen these images at all because they're always tack sharp. I've never had any issues with that. Focus is really quick and spot on, so that's one thing that I really disliked about the EF 1.2 is that it tended to hunt around a lot and it wasn't always in focus. It was pretty slow to focus. So this has 2 USM motors in it. They sound pretty beefy because you can hear them. They're a little louder than some of the Sony lenses out there. I think their autofocus is a little more smooth, a little more quiet, but they are very good, very snappy. It tracks. We have a 15-month-old, which we did some photos on the beach, and it tracked him very, very well. So it's a very good lens when it comes to tracking. And I have the 35mm 1.8 STM, and it's a little bit slower to track, so it's not quite as fast as this. I know different focal lengths, but they should be pretty similar with autofocus to this. It's just real. It's just snappy. Like if you're like doing any type of pro work or any type of wedding where you don't have a lot of time to worry about focusing, if you have the R6 or R5 in this, you're gonna get spot on photos. I have almost 100% hit rate with this thing. You know, when I within reason. And I'm not a pro. I'm just a regular hobbyist, so I'm not anyone that knows basically what I'm doing. We'll say that. So background blur is amazing on this. It is really, really smooth. Has a ton of character to it, the background blur. So if you look at some of the reviews of the 1.2 and the 1.8 RF lens, the 1.8 background can get a little busy, or that's what people say. I've looked at photos of it, so if it has like a green, like some grass or anything in the background, it can look a little busy, or trees, anything like that. But this is very, very smooth. It destroys the background so you can barely see it, so it's really nice in that front, and it has a lot of character. So I previously had the Sony a7R IV, and I really like those lenses, but they seem to lack character. So technically they were perfect, but when it comes to character, they just didn't have a whole lot in my eyes. So this is also really nice shooting into the sun. You get a nice lot of lens flares. The only thing is you do tend to get some rainbow effects in it, so I will try to put some photos up of it, but if you look at some more technical people's reviews of it, it'll have these rainbows, 1 or 2, depending on how you shoot into the sun. I don't use a lens hood, so you could probably get rid of that if you use a lens hood, but I don't really like add any more bulk to the system that I need. So it's one of the most well engineered lenses out there. Great color, great contrast. You don't have to do a whole lot when you're editing these. I actually tend to like the JPEG straight out of the camera. I usually shoot them raw because I like playing around with the files a little bit, but you don't have to sharpen them. I rarely add contrast or anything along that line just because it already has a ton in it. So that's one of the big things I like about it. And I don't even like the 50mm focal length. It's probably one of my least favorite focal lengths. I prefer a 35, like a 35 and a 135. I know those are way on different focal lengths, but that's probably the two lenses that I would use the most. And then 24mm I would really like for video, but 50mm is not usually something I enjoy. But I really like this lens because I have the 35 1.8, and we've probably taken 50-50 photos with both, and I tend to keep these 90% of the time, whereas in the 35 1.8 it has a little bit of character, but it just seems very similar to all the 35mm budget-oriented lenses out there. There's not a whole lot of wow factor to the photos, so I rarely keep those, but I keep most of all of these. They're just that good. I ordered some prints of them recently from our beach where we did some photos there, so we'll see how those turn out. But the only two negatives I can find with this is that it's expensive. You're going to pay over $2,000. It's hard to find. So I got lucky and got it in the Canon outlet for the price point that I did. But if you order it new, it's generally 2 to 4 weeks back order before it's even going to ship, or at least that's what B&H says on their website. So it is hard to find, very expensive, very, very heavy. So if you're looking for a light setup and you're not invested in the Canon route, I would steer you towards Nikon or Sony. They have more of the compact lenses. They have a lot of 1.8. Even the Sonys, the 1.4s and 1.2s are way smaller than these. I don't know if that's because the diameter of the actual lens mount on theirs is smaller, so they can do it a little bit better. They're just way further along, I think, with the lenses than we got here. But I'm really happy with this. I plan on keeping it till they release the 35 1.2L, which they've already done a patent on. Supposedly it's supposed to come at the end of this year, Q4 of 2021. At least that was the last rumor. It was supposed to be out already, but with COVID and all the chip shortages, manufacturing issues, they had to delay it like everything. So that's it. I'm really happy with it. If you have the money, it's not going to destroy your bank account. And especially if you like this focal length and you plan on using it a lot, this is a go-to lens. I don't like zooms, so I wouldn't even look at any of those. They're just not my cup of tea. I find zooms are too confusing for me. I just like the one focal length, and then I like to move around. So that's it. If you have any comments, questions, leave them below. Hopefully this is a little more helpful than my last one, which was just a little more technical. This is just more of a random casual review. I hope you have a good rest of the day, weekend, whatever it is out there, and I'll see you guys next time.